Welcome back to Spitball and Cards. My name is Scott. We also have Jeff, Chris, and Ty on this episode. Phil is not here, but we do have producer Lance in place. Lance, it's always good to have you here. We have some fun topics to talk about with you. So we want to talk everything about if modern players will have any value. Chris actually made a big trade and more. So let's actually start with that. Chris, you've been hinting but not telling a trade you made. What happened?
Okay, so yes, I am a 40-plus-year-old man, and yes, I did trade baseball cards with a friend of mine. It's something I've been doing since I was in 6th grade, and I'm comfortable saying I'm still not 100% sure about trades that I make. But I feel okay about this one, and I know the other guy does too, so it's fine to talk about. So here's the trade. First off, we agreed that the two sides of this trade would be, we agreed on value at $650. So here we go. The first side is a 2019 Bowman Chrome Gold Refractor Austin Riley rookie card in a PSA 10. Now, the only sale we could find was an eBay sale at $500. So we figured $450 in value, taking away 10% for eBay, plus $200 in cash. So that's one side. More information, the Bowman Chrome Riley gem is a Pop 7. And Riley came up a little bit late. He doesn't have that many rookies. All right. Second side of the trade is a 2018 Topps flagship SSP of Mookie Betts in a PSA 10. So here's a picture of him. I think he's on second base. His hand is up. He's kind of like pointing up like all the SSPs are.
Or is he doing this instead?
Yes, I think it looks like a Salt Bay type thing.
Salt Bay thing. That was his celebration that year.
Yes, and this is a Pop 8. So that's a Pop 8. So that's the two halves. Now, I'm not telling you which half was mine, but I'm very curious. Let's go. Teapot, tell me what you think.
I feel like you're like going back to last week when I was talking about how I like short prints and things more than rookie cards. So I'm going to go with the Mookie. I like the Mookie.
Yeah. You're familiar with the card? You've seen it before?
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah, the 2018 SSPs are really, really hard to find.
Yep.
But that 2019 Bowman Chrome set is awesome with the 3/4 border. The golds really pop. Plus, he's a Brave. All right. So I got one vote for Mookie. Scotty, tell me what you think.
That Mookie had to have been on eBay recently because I was watching it. At least a PSA 10 of that exact same card, which makes me think that you got that card. And I pick the Mookie myself because, one, the image is fantastic. It's a true SSP. And that's when SSPs were actually SSPs. I don't care about the grade all that much, to be honest with you. But I do think the PSA 10 adds value for who gets that card in the future. I think Austin Riley's great, but I'm not a Braves fan. So I wouldn't really want that card personally in my collection. But that's just me.
Okay.
The cash is nice. Cash is nice for sure.
Yeah, cash is always good. Yeah. All right, Jeff. My favorite cardboard. What do we got? Tell me what you think.
Well, I do love me a good super short print. What's the pop on that Betts again? Did you say 8?
The Betts is Pop 8, and the Austin Riley is Pop 7. We both know that Bowman Chrome set's real tough to gem.
Yeah. What is the overall number of graded Betts in that?
That's an excellent question. I want to say it's under 20.
I looked it up and it wasn't high because I was really watching it because another one sold like the week prior.
A PSA 9 went for about $275 on eBay, give or take.
I think it went for more because I bid like $270. I think it went like $350.
Oh,
so
okay, all right.
Yeah, I love that 2019 Bowman Chrome set. Those are really tough. Like centering was bad on those, so there are a lot of centering issues. The thing is, I've never been a huge Riley fan, but he just keeps proving me wrong. So Riley Gold rookie. Plus the cash. Yeah, I mean, I love the Betts, but I'd probably take the other side.
Before you share what happened, I have a picture of the card. I can show it of the Mookie. So here it is. And for those viewers that aren't seeing it, it's literally Mookie Betts, Mookie base, you could say, because he gets hits. Standing on second base, doing the Salt Bay celebration with like his like kind of signature face, making like a pouty face kind of. Okay.
Yeah.
So what
cool
happened?
Image, great SSP.
Yeah. All right. I think it will surprise you guys, based on my jersey, to know that I actually acquired the Mookie Betts in this trade.
Nice. Great
Now
job.
I love that Austin Riley card, and I'm very familiar with the guy that I traded with. We talk about cards all the time, and I told him like, if you ever want to sell that Mookie Betts, like please let me know. We can work something out. So he listed on eBay, and then he messaged me. We talked. He's a big Braves fan too, and Austin Riley he doesn't have a lot of rookies. He really doesn't. His main ones are like he's in Topps Chrome Update for the base card. He's in Bowman Chrome and Bowman's Best, and like. That's pretty much it. He's in Topps Update as well, but I mean that's it. So he only has 100 gold refractors that matter. I don't care about Bowman's Best. I don't think that really counts. So I had a real hard time. I knew exactly what this guy was going to want when we talked about a trade because he asked me about that card before. I think I spent like 48 hours just debating this and sort of wallowing. Like I will miss that Austin Riley card because Jeff knows I bought it raw. Like we wiped it down, we gemmed it. So you always have like a personal attachment to a card that you got raw and gemmed. Plus, he's like one of my favorite players on my favorite team. My wife loves his lower body in a way that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's best to get that card out of my house. But those SSPs, I love that 2018 set. I'm working on like one of my collecting goals is the 2017 and 2018, the flagship SSPs for all the guys that I feel like are Hall of Fame track guys. So for 2018, I've got the Freeman, the Harper, and the Betts now in the PSA 10. And there's one more that I forget that I have that I can't think of right now. For 17, I've got just about the same guys. I still can't track down the Trouts, but this is my first real shot at a Harper and a PSA 10. So I am very excited to bring this card in, but I will desperately miss that Austin Riley because I have not seen another one come up for sale.
One thing I'll note is if you ever want to extort Chris for cash, go find PSA 10 Mike Trout super short prints, and he will do whatever it needs to get it done.
Well, yeah. Jeff, you said you traded like you were in 6th grade. I don't know any 6th graders with $200 in cash on them. So.
No, but the Greg Jeffries cards that I traded back in 6th grade, they felt like they were going to be
felt like that, sure. Yeah,
you know,
really true.
They definitely never were and are not going to be. But man, can you imagine? By the way, can you imagine what a first Bowman Chrome auto of Greg Jeffries would have gone for in like the spring of 1989?
Or Brian Taylor, or anyone. I will say though, total pop 13 graded, 8 PSA 10, 4 9s, 1 6. So there's not very many graded at all, especially for a player of Betts caliber. How many of those do you think are just in random boxes with kids across the country? Isn't that like
I don't know. I wonder about the 17 and 18 SSBs. We could do a whole show on these. I love these cards. You just so rarely see them. And when they pop up on eBay, there's like a vocal community on Instagram that talks about them. And there's like a buzz everywhere. Jeff and I actually picked up a 2017 Betts.
That one's
cool. He's jumping with Christian Vasquez.
Yeah.
We bought it from a guy in Australia, and I happened to be awake when he listed it at like 1 o'clock in the morning, our time. And we knew it had a touch on one corner, so we knew it wouldn't gem. It came, we were looking at it, and right before we sent it in, we noticed there's like a divot on the back.
Oh.
So it's probably like a 7, but I'm still just excited to have that like in our possession. Like it's super rare. But these are like Scotty said, these are the essence of SSPs.
I would be careful with talking stuff up to the public because now hundreds and hundreds of dedicated listeners, thank you for listening, are going to look for those cards now. And for good reason. They're beautiful. They're beautiful cards. So, but the one thing I'll say is congrats. I actually was watching that on eBay. I knew exactly which card you were talking about. And I figured it was yours when you said that one of them was involved because it was pulled off of eBay.
Yeah, that's a great trade, though. I mean, I feel like both sides got a pretty unique card, and it's going to be interesting because those are the type of cards that could get a little bump with the postseason based on performance, team and player performance. So it'll be fun to watch that trade.
So Riley's had some big moments. Hopefully, he's got a couple more up his sleeve.
I will say as well. Do you believe Austin Riley is going to make the Hall of Fame? Question: yes or no? No explanation. Yes or no?
I don't know. It's too early. I will say Betts has a much better shot.
Oh, I'm going to say
out of the realm of possibility for.
I would say if I had to guess right now, based off of his career trajectory, I would say no. He has a chance for sure. But
yes, I would say no as well. Gun to my head, I'd say no.
That Mookie's probably going to be harder to find than Austin Riley will be. Because if he doesn't make the Hall of Fame, it's amazing how far cards drop. It's amazing. But I do think there's a good chance he could end up with an amazing career too. So I wouldn't say it's certainty either way.
No, it's really hard to tell. I mean, if you told me he was going to hit 400 career home runs, I'd be like, I believe it.
Yeah.
Will that get him in? I don't know.
Especially, we looked at his recent performance on a previous episode. He's really turned it on the last few years.
Yes,
and he's still
defensively,
young,
especially.
26. Like, I think we think of Austin Riley, we think of an older player, but he actually debuted pretty young, which is great for his values.
And for his values to be on that team with everybody locked up for the next decade, that's a nice spot to be.
Definitely. He'll definitely have opportunities to drive runs in on that team. It's
Yeah,
pretty surprising.
he's gonna be somewhere between Acuna and Matt Olson for the next 5 years. That's a pretty good spot to.
It has to be so fun to be a Braves fan. It has to be so much fun. Producer Lance and I are Rockies fans, and it's not as much fun.
No.
What's it like to follow a team that actually
It's
wins?
competent.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. It's just I don't know how to really describe you. It's probably euphoria is the closest thing to it. Like Acuna gets up, even my wife stops what she's doing, and will watch Acuna's at bats. And then if he gets on first, she'll wait and see if he scores, if he steals, and then like she'll go on about her business after that. But I feel like he's basically must-see TV if you're a baseball fan, unless you're a fan of like the Mets.
It's one of those things where like, oh boy, can't wait to watch the Braves tonight, and you watch a good game. For me, it's like, oh boy, can't wait to watch the Rockies tonight, and they give up 9 runs in the first inning. Like, okay, I will watch that for a week.
Yeah.
So,
but
anyways,
yeah.
Well, I think that was a great trade. Good job, Chris.
Congrats.
It's good for both of us. I think
cool
we're both very happy, and that's all you can ask for in a trade.
I'm extremely biased to the Mookie side. I think both of you did just fine. If the other listeners here at PSA 10, if he does end up a Hall of Famer, it's going to be a massive card. So that's a great trade.
Agreed.
Okay, so speaking of, this actually is a great segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about. Relevancy of players in the long run, right? So when we think of players who are collectible from the 50s, we have a handful. We can think of Roberto Clemente. We can think of Hank Aaron. We can think of Willie Mays. We can think of Mickey Mantle. We can think of Sandy Koufax. And maybe even Frank Robinson and guys like that sprinkled in, who are kind of like the lesser Hall of Famers who are still great ball players. But then as we move forward into the 70s and 80s, it's not quite as clear who has the value in the hobby from that era, right? We have Cal Ripken Jr., we have Ricky Henderson, we have other players like that who are amazing, all-time greats, but they don't seem to command a huge hobby premium when it comes to people who collect those players. And on top of that, their cards having very much value. And I have my own thoughts behind that we can discuss. But my question is for you, are we going to see with the modern players, the Mike Trouts, the Mookie Betts, the Bryce Harpers, those type of players, are we going to see them have a collectability level of Ricky Henderson and Cal Ripken Jr., where no one besides maybe the people who watched them directly are collecting them? Or is it going to be more like the Mantles and the Aarons? Like, what is the collectability of cards right now? What are they going to be worth in 25 years? What are your thoughts?
I'll jump in. I've done some videos on this in the past of other sports, of basketball. And I think this is a really interesting case study because cards have evolved so much over time. One of the things, if you go back, I feel like I have an affinity for vintage, certain, older vintage sets. The colors really pop to me. They just look like such simple, compelling card designs, a lot of profile shots and other great action pictures. Then you start getting into like late 70s and for sure into the 80s, and those cards just become incredibly uninteresting to me. They don't look good. I just generally don't care about them. So the plus is that you have certain really high profile players from the 80s and from other decades certainly as well. So it makes it easy to like focus in on one key rookie card or two for a specific player. And if you're one of those players or people who's interested in getting a rookie card or a key card for every Hall of Famer, for example, that makes it really simple. The flip side of that today is we're in this like historically unprecedented time with so many different rookie cards, so many different variations, plus Bowman prospects, plus. The conversation we just had is a really fascinating one because we're talking about a super short print image variation of a future Hall of Famer, not a rookie card. And so how do those things, how do the superfractors of Mookie, how do all those other cards factor into what people are going to want to chase and go after long-term into the future? I think if you look at it on like a 20 to 25 year curve, that's still pretty safe for the players who now for sure are going to be Hall of Famers. So even if we look at like Ichiro, we look at Albert Pujols, we look at Miguel Cabrera, we look at some of the greatest players, from the 2000s, let's say, those players, I don't know that they're going to like skyrocket to the moon. If I had to pick one guy from, that era, I would say Pujols maybe has the most potential personally. I might be a little biased because he's probably my favorite player of all time. But I worry about how players fall off collectively. And it's not just a baseball thing, it's all sports, as they fade from the collective consciousness of people. And we can go back to the 90s and start looking at players like Frank Thomas, like Tony Gwynn, like others who were really, really, really good players. And now if you were to ask some like 20-year-old, what can you tell me about Tony Gwynn? They might not even know who that is. So when we look at today's cards, there's tons of them, a lot of different variations, a lot of different things just from their rookie year, let alone every other year, that if they're not the absolute cream of the crop, and the people who are constantly in, winning awards or, winning Silver Sluggers, whatever, certainly MVPs, or had some other fame like Judge did, breaking the home run record in the AL, something like that cements them into the minds of people. I do fear that some of them could fade away. A guy like Austin Riley might be one of those. And I like Austin Riley quite a bit, but he's kind of the perfect example where you kind of go, man, I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do long term. Even if he does carve out a Hall of Fame career, I don't know if people will really remember him compared to some of the other more notable players from this era.
Paul Goldschmidt's a good example of that. I collect Paul Goldschmidt. I do not expect him to be highly collected in 20 years. But I have some amazing.
He might, though.
He might, like for Diamondbacks fans, they might.
Yeah, that's why I say that, because he was such a staple on their team, and he was really good, very notable in fantasy baseball. And then obviously, went and had a pretty good year there with the Cardinals too. So
one of two first basemen all time with 300 home runs and 200 stolen bases.
Yeah.
Who's the other one? Do you know?
Bagwell.
Attaboy. Jeff Bagwell was the only other option. So he has had an amazing career, and he will make the Hall of Fame. But I know what you're saying exactly. The one thing, before I share my thoughts, I will let Jeff and Chris share their opinions. Jeff, Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
All right, well, a couple things I want to add. That was really interesting, Ty. I appreciated hearing that insight. It makes a lot of sense to me. I think the one thing when we talk about guys specifically from the 80s and maybe 70s and 80s, but guys like Henderson and that ilk, it's that there were just so few options. So
yeah.
Like the past couple of years, Chris and I have been picking up some black refractors of guys like Pujols and Miguel Cabrera, non-rookie, just rarer cards from later on in their career. And to have players that don't have those sort of, I guess, scarce or collectible cards, and you're only limited by condition for a lot of those players, I think that's limiting in terms of collecting. So that was one point I want to make. And the other one is, I think that with so much, there's so much exposure to players now with social media, Instagram, Facebook, even some behind the scenes stuff of players. I feel like we get to know the players a lot better than at least I did as a kid. I mean, we had like This Week in Baseball, and that's kind of the only time when you could learn about these players. And some players are active on social media. I feel like that's going to help keep them collectible, keep them in the public sphere a little bit longer. So looking at that 20 to 25 year horizon, I do feel like the guys that are popular now, even that we've talked about before on the show, guys like Tatis, Soto, Acuna, that are very exciting and engaged with the fan base. You can tell they love to play. I feel like those sorts of players will stay collectible as we go on. But I think there are going to be a lot of players, a lot of really good players that do fall by the wayside the longer time horizon gets.
I want to add one question to this. If Ricky Henderson had a Bowman Chrome autograph, gold refractor, what would that go for?
It would go for more than his rookie in a PSA 10.
Yeah, exactly. I think part of the reason why certain people don't care as much, because there are some dedicated Ricky Henderson and Cal Ripken Jr. fans listening to this right now saying, you're all wrong. I love these guys because it's more simplistic. It was an era where it was one card or very few cards, and that's a great perspective. The issue we have is they're just a little bit too late, or the print runs weren't quite low enough like they were with all the 60s and 50s and 40s cards, and a little bit too early to have all the SPs and parallels and numbered cards. And I think that
And
is
autographs.
in autographs. I think that's more of the reason than anything else to me. But really, I just have to imagine if Ricky Henderson had a Bowman Chrome autograph gold refractor BGS 10, like that would be a monumental card, $100,000 plus card. And then it changes his perspective among other hobbyists, in my opinion, about his collectability. So I think that the players now do have that going for them, but I'd love to have you say I'm wrong if you disagree.
I
think
definitely think
guys-
that's
Guys
true.
from like, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say guys from like 80, like 79, 80, like Ricky Henderson, his first 8 years, you had 3 cards to choose from. So I feel like he and Ripken, that sort of is one of the things that makes those 90s inserts, like the 93 finest refractor. I feel like if you're a big Hall of Fame guy, if you love those guys, that's the first card of those guys that is truly limited, that looks special, that's like a real chrome refractor. They know it. I think it's 241 copies. Those things sell through the roof anytime they come up, because that's like their first significant chrome card.
And Henderson played a long time, till 2003. So it's not like he didn't have that era, but it's so much different having an early card for some reason, right?
Agreed.
And having a Los Angeles Dodgers 2003 refractor of Ricky Henderson. It's not quite the same.
It's not the same. But for Ripken, it's different because he's still on the Orioles. Like the Ripken, the Ryan, even the Mattingly out of that set, those things sell for like 5 figures in a PSA 10.
You were going to challenge me, I think. What were you going to say?
No. I think I think like I was trying to say is it's really difficult to compare players from other generations. Let's call it the pre-refractor era. It's nearly impossible to compare those players to our ultra-modern era now and to project forward and say how many of these players will be relevant and which of their cards will be relevant. There's a major attention span problem today with the younger generation. I'll lump myself into that as I inch closer to 40 every year. But there's, people are sort of like on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. Definitely think it's true that the access to players and the social media and all those things create collectability around them. One of the things I try to really think about, though, is how much collective theoretical money at any given point in time is injected into a player's cards. If you were to add up the price of what all of those cards went for based on last comp, that's a bad, impossible thing, but you can sort of conceptualize it, and you see millions and millions and millions of dollars, even for players who aren't any of the players that we've named here, like for players who are, borderline fringe all-stars or lower. They have many, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in their cards. Whereas if you go back to like 1977, I'm looking at Dale Murphy's rookie catcher's tops card in a PSA 10. That card's pop 63, last sold for almost $4K. And the only reason I would argue that card is, almost sold for $4K is because it's his only rookie card and it's pop 63. So there's sort of that, forced scarcity with the grade, and then the scarcity with it being the only card that exists. You project forward many, many years into the future, actually just go to the 2000s and look at a player like Buster Posey, who is absolutely fantastic, or Joe Mauer, even Yadier Molina, different type of player, obviously, but like those 3 guys, catchers, going into the 2000s, some of the best players in Major League Baseball year over year consistently. And now I look at a guy like Adley Rutschman, and I'm like, he's got so many different cards. There are some comparable types of cards with those black refractors and other things for those guys I just mentioned in the 2000s. But as time goes on, the collectability of those cards seems to become less, even with fewer of them regularly surfacing on eBay. I mean, I have safe searches for Mauer. His stuff doesn't, pop up often, certain cards. So that's the kind of interesting thought exercise as we look forward like 20, 25 years, is to go, because there are so many cards now, does that force collectors over time to actually focus in with an even more narrow focus onto some of the types of iconic parallels and other things that we've, discussed as a group so many times offline, gold refractors and things of that nature. So
Absolutely.
that's what I think is going to be really interesting.
Great point. Well, here's a question for you. In 1984, Cal Ripken Jr. led all of Major League Baseball in WAR. He had 10.0 WAR that year. Where did he finish in the MVP race? What position do you think?
1984.
And who won that year? Oof.
I'm not going to tell you that yet.
No.
I'll just tell you.
We should be able to come up with who won in 1984.
I know who won, and it's
I know
terrible.
who won. I got it.
You know who won?
Almost swore. Sorry, it was a relief pitcher for crying
Yes.
out loud. Won.
Willie freaking
An
Hernandez.
insane. Yeah.
Yep. Willie
Relief
Hernandez.
pitchers should never, ever win the MVP. Ever, 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 never.
And that was a long run. There were a lot of them in the 80s. Raleigh Fingers won it with
Yeah.
the Brewers, too. Steve
Yeah.
Bedrosian for the Phillies.
But Cal Ripken Jr. was 27th in MVP voting that year with 10 WAR.
What?
And it's just funny to look at this now. And second was Kent Herbeck, who had like almost identical numbers as Cal Ripken Jr. Almost identical numbers as Cal Ripken Jr.
How did the Orioles finish? Because they were just coming off like a World Series.
A World Series in 83. That's
Cal
weird.
Ripken Jr. also won the MVP the year prior.
Right.
And so you would think he would get a boost. But MVP 27, he received one vote. And it probably was like one writer's last vote. And
Who
so
finished 26th?
Doyle Alexander.
Unbelievable.
Mike. Oh, I don't want to say that name. I don't know if I say that right.
Boddicker?
Yeah. I don't want to say that one wrong. And
It was
then,
either that or Hunt.
oh my gosh, I don't know any of these names. Lloyd Mosby, Buddy Bell, Andre Thornton, George Bell, Steve Balboni, Brian Downing, Willie Upshaw.
Okay, this you're making a great point right now going through this. This is the year before I was born, 1984. And if I go through this list, I've only even heard of less than half of these guys.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
We do have
MVP votes used to be insane.
I know all those guys. They're good for the grid. In fact, I used Andre Thornton today on today's grid.
Oh, you guys are so good at that. I'm so bad at that game because I can't remember all these random players like Don Kiesenberry, who was third that year with
Dan Quisenberry?
Quisenberry.
Never heard of Dan Quisenberry?
Another
He was one of
relief
the first
pitcher with 44
sidearm guys.
saves. He was third that year. It's just crazy. But
Yeah,
anyway,
It's really fun actually to go year over year and look at the MVP voting list and just to go, wow, forgot about that guy. Wow, that guy was good for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, maybe. The guy like Ryan Howard, who was just mashing and doing the Subway commercials and, lighting the world on fire and then just can't play anymore.
Yeah.
Dan Quisenberry was the GOAT in the early 80s and mid 80s.
It goes back to Quisenberry.
Yeah. Submariner.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some pretty big numbers, big famous numbers that didn't win MVPs. Like when Ted Williams hit 406, he didn't win the MVP. We all know when McGuire hit 73, he hit 62, he did not win the MVP. MVP votes are weird.
Well, and especially in the pre-war era. The pre-war era, you can look back and see some of these crazy numbers. Like, what did Willie Hernandez? Was he like a 2.1 WAR that
he had
season?
a good year. He had a good
He
year.
had a lot of innings, right?
Yeah.
24. It was a good year, but it wasn't 10 WAR Ripken Jr. There's been some bad votes as of the last decade.
Was Hernandez a closer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did he have a lot?
That was the Tigers were by far the best team in baseball. They were at one point, I think they started the year like 35-7 or something. Like they were
35-5
unstoppable the whole season.
Their first 40 games.
But I mean, he wasn't their best player. If they're going to give it to a Tiger, like Alan Trammell should.
Alan Trammell. Yeah.
I think he won the World Series MVP.
Look at Derek Jeter, the year he ran a runner-up to, who was it? Justin Morneau. I mean, come on. 4.3 WAR Morneau that year. I mean, come on.
I mean, I would have voted for Morneau, but that's just my unbiased Yankee hatred, like sneaking through
over David Ortiz. Okay, I got to show this to you.
Oh, no,
why would you vote for Morneau? I don't understand.
Just over Derek Jeter.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. But like, we look at Justin Morneau. There's a story that was told that obviously we don't have, right? Let me make this bigger for everybody who has a screen. Like, you have to, like, if you don't vote for Derek Jeter right here with 5.64. It wasn't a great season for anybody, but at least David Ortiz had 54 home runs, 137 RBI, to 1.049 OPS. Today, he would have easily won. You would have got an argument for Joe Mauer with the 347 batting title as a catcher. That doesn't happen. So, but like Morneau, he probably would have finished. He would have finished maybe 10th if I had to guess.
No, you're right. And I want to
Yeah,
give a quick
so I'm
shout
saying
out
it doesn't happen now.
No.
Yeah, this was, what year was this? This was like 2006 or something.
I think that's 6. Yeah, because I shout out one of my favorite baseball players and favorite baseball seasons of all time. It's Travis Hafner.
Nice. Even the NL was wrong that year in my eyes. Albert Pujols should have won it over Ryan Howard, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But Ryan Howard almost hit 60 home runs, so voters didn't even look any further.
But, so.
That was one of Pujols' runner-up seasons. Look at that. Insane.
That's Ryan Howard. We can go into Albert Pujols' career. I know Ty will appreciate this, and we can look at all of these MVP votes and get an idea. Like this year, 2006, look at this, 1.0. Is that actually, I think that was that year we just
That was that year. He finished
that was
behind
that
Howard.
year. Yeah. And so he even led the league at OPS plus this year. Let's see who he lost to. Joey Votto. I don't know. Like, it makes sense. Let him in a lot of categories, just not. Yeah. So this is getting more towards modern day voting right there.
Go back, Scott. Go back to Pujols.
Even to look at that, Votto versus Pujols right there, 31 votes to 1 vote, first place vote. That's crazy.
It's all about narrative. It's all about narrative.
Yeah. Go back to Pujols. This was the screenshot that I sent on our little group chat yesterday. And just I was sort of asking the question, who from our era right now could we see even remotely possibly having the type of run, just looking in the awards column for Pujols that he did? Just stay at the top, stay all the way at the top in that run, right?
I was just being
rookie of the year, MVP 4, then MVP 2, MVP 3, winner 2, then he had the 9, then 1, 1, 2, 5. Like, what was it, 11 seasons or something? Where he's basically MVP 3 or better every year. I mean, we just don't see that.
Even the 9 was a great season. I'm sure looking back at it, he probably should have finished higher than 9.
Yeah. This is the closest we've been this run.
Yeah.
5, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2 of Mike Trout.
Yep.
And then to throw someone in his hat in the ring, we're going to go look at Mr. Betts.
We looked at his. It's impressive, but it's not as good.
No, it's not. But like, this is kind of what it's going to be. Second, 2, 6, 1, 8, 2, didn't get it, 5, 2. Like, that's still really good. He was hurt this year. But I totally agree. Anyways, we went on a tangent. I could go on Baseball Reference all day.
It's a good tangent.
It's tough at work sometimes because I do go on Baseball Reference all day. And I actually have a stat head membership, and I get pulled into that way too much.
Scott's going to flex his stat head membership weekly.
Stat head. I'm a stat header.
Like,
I'm going to get a t-shirt. It's no big deal. But anyways, so thank you for discussing that. I think we're all in agreement that it's more of a product of the era than the players. If you drop Ricky Henderson in today's game, he's kind of Acuna in some ways, with less power, but with more speed. I think that he would be more collectible in the hobby. And I think he'd be more collectible long-term if he had more SSPs or an SSP image variation, Topps Chrome rookie, that type of a thing. So overall,
I just want to piggyback on that. I think that's one thing that we do have to give Topps credit for is the expanding the market, creating parallels that drive collector interest.
Yeah.
So it's fun to collect 3rd, 4th, 5th year black parallels of some of these players, whereas before their 3rd, 4th, 5th year base card doesn't do much, even in a good grade. So I think that is one step that the hobbies made that really it makes it more fun for collectors.
Totally agree. And I do have a question. I'm posing a question, and this is not an attack on Nolan Arenado collectors, but I want to bring up Nolan Arenado for a minute. Okay. So again, I do this thing where I just look at stats all the time. It's how I enjoy baseball. It's why I enjoy baseball over basketball, because you can quantify value. You can understand value. It's generally accepted of value. It might change slightly over the decades, like we just saw with MVP voting. But Nolan Arenado is a fascinating case study, and there's other players we can discuss outside of Arenado. This is not an attack on him of traditional stats versus the modern stats, okay? And Arenado's modern stats, like the sabermetrics, aren't that great, but his traditional stats are fantastic. So I wanted to discuss Nolan Arenado, discuss his hobby in comparison to pricing of other players, and think if we think he's overvalued or undervalued. So I want to give a little bit of insight. I'm going to share my screen again. Is that okay with everybody here versus reading stats? I will still read them for the viewers that are listening. But if we share my screen, let me pull it up real quick. Nolan Arenado, you would suspect he's been in the league since 2013 as an everyday big leaguer. But right now, he actually only has 48 career Fangraphs WAR and a 120 WRC plus. 100 is league average, so he's only been 20% better as a hitter than league average. He does have 10 gold gloves, multiple platinum gloves. He's won a gold glove every year he's been in the big leagues. He will not win one this year. He has not been as great this year. He's been hurt a ton as well. And he has 325 home runs. But again, his OPS and WRC plus aren't quite where you would expect. If we want to go look at baseball reference, it is a little bit better. 54.4 WAR with a 122 OPS plus with 10 gold gloves, 6 platinum gloves, 5 silver sluggers. He's actually one of 11 players, found this out through StatHead, that has 5 silver sluggers and 5 gold gloves. Mookie Betts is another one, just saying. Derek Jeter actually is in there as well. He might not have been there in today's voting.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, but if we scroll down, he does have black ink, right? He led the league in all these categories. And overall, he's more expensive than Freddie Freeman. He's more expensive than Joey Votto. He's more expensive than Manny Machado, more expensive than Paul Goldschmidt, more expensive than that Buster Posey, more expensive than a lot of people. Is that justified, or is it actually a little bit overblown? Like, what are your thoughts after hearing all of that?
I think anyone who's more expensive than Freddie Freeman, it's not justified and it's overblown.
Sorry, Mike Trout.
Yeah, no, sorry. I don't get it. I don't see it. Yeah, I think he got, if I'm not mistaken, Scotty, you're more of an Arenado fan than I am.
Yes.
I feel like last year he got a big bump in his card values. He was like runner up to the MVP.
No, actually, surprisingly, I collect Arenado, so I'm not like saying he's bad, and I will continue to buy his cards. I have some of his best rookie cards. I have his red ink heritage autograph out of 10, his rookie auto. Like, there's not many of those that exist. I have some other really cool stuff. But he got a bump last year with the big MVP finish. Last year was the best year of his career, like by far. But the 2 years before that were weak. He had 1.5 WAR in 2020, which was 1.4 defensive WAR. He was horrible offensively. Next year with St. Louis, he only had 4 WAR. This year he has 2.4. So his last 4 years, only one has been good. And he does have a bump. But even before that, his cards are expensive. Rockies fans love him. People from the Cardinals love him. So he's always had value because of the defense, I think.
Yeah, he's played for 2 passionate fan bases. I mean, you two are still passionate Colorado Rockies fans for really no discernible reason that I can imagine at this point.
I'm just the same.
Yeah, I mean, and Cardinals fans are very passionate, but I think he's overvalued. I feel like I don't know. I own 0 Arenado cards, for full disclosure for anyone listening. And I honestly have no plans in the near future to buy any. I just don't see it. I think he's declining the way most people do decline.
But at the same time,
the Cardinals are not going to be any better next year than they were this year. There's no reason to think the Cardinals as a team will improve. I don't think they have a single starting pitcher under contract for next year. So I just don't see it. If you're choosing between Arenado and Freddie Freeman, I don't think that's even a choice. And that's not just because of my unabashed man crush on Freddie Freeman. Trying to be biased or not.
Yeah, I mean, Arenado is one of those guys who actually seems to derive collectibility and hobby value from his defense, which is rare because most players don't do that. His numbers, his counting numbers are a little bit inflated because of his Colorado years. And
reverse effect says otherwise, Jeff. But yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Well, you said yourself how he's not recognized in most modern sabermetric stats as being an elite player. So even if he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, I mean, he's a guy that might just get in. So is that enough to keep his prices where they are? And when you mention guys like Freddie Freeman and Manny Machado, I feel like at lower prices, those guys have a much higher ceiling, a much better Hall of Fame case, and better hobby collectability in the future.
I think if we're just looking at prices, and if Arenado is that inflated, and I haven't looked recently to really do that kind of a deep dive comparison, but taking your word for it that he's more expensive than Machado or Freeman, okay, then maybe he's not a buy. But if you're just talking about the player, I think you kind of glossed over the defensive awards a
Yeah,
little too easily, Scott.
it was
He's
intentional.
he's tied for the second most Gold Gloves of all time by third baseman Mike Schmidt. Only Brooks Robinson is ahead of him with 16, which is insane. He's not only won that, but he's won 6 platinum gloves since that award was implemented. So he's the best defensive player in the league, in the National League. He's won, like you said, 5 Silver Slugger awards. What's really interesting is, so he's 32, Machado's 31. If you go back a year ago to Arenado's 31-year-old season, he was MVP 3 in the league. Yes, he had a bad year this year, but his numbers this season are not much worse than Machado's are. They're very similar. And he's got, and their B wars are similar. Machado's got a slight lead on him. So like, if I were looking at those two players and just saying like, who do I think has a better long-term Hall of Fame type of case? I think Arenado does, because he's won so many defensive awards, and maybe that's bias. I like defense. Admittedly, I really like players who excel in defense. The number of ESPN top 10 highlights that I remember watching of Arenado over the last decade has been like, it was like every week, here's this guy just doing something that nobody else in the league could do. So I'm probably biased to that, but like, even making a comparison, if I was looking at Freeman's stats, we were talking about like the year-over-year awards and how those kinds of things stacked up. So you have Arenado going back to 2015, MVP 8, MVP 5, MVP 4, MVP 3, MVP 6, skip 2 years, and then an MVP 3. And if you go to Freeman, he's got a bunch of gaps. He had MVP 5 in 2013, MVP 23. It's hardly worth mentioning. He had an MVP 6 2 years later, 4, 8. Then he obviously won it, a 9 and a 4. So it's a little bit more like distributed, a little less consistency just in that awards column. Freeman's obviously a fantastic player. I like his odds for the Hall of Fame as well. But he's 2 years older, 34, with a 55.8 B WAR. So I kind of think of all three of these guys, maybe I don't know, wrongly so, in the same type of class, and I'd throw Goldschmidt into that same category. As I like them all, but I could see somebody saying like, if they feel like Arenado's cards are a little overly inflated, they probably still are carrying a lot of that from last year, because they definitely did spike up last season when it was like for a while him or Goldschmidt.
So Teapot, how does actually winning then? So winning an MVP, winning a championship, how does that doesn't really push the needle for you?
I think no. I think it might. I think it might. And he was such an important part of obviously of that team. And there's probably a little more recency bias with Freeman, because he's still playing at an incredibly high level right now. Whereas which is interesting, although not unseen with a first baseman. To play well into their late 30s or even to 40 or so. So I don't know. I don't know how you stack that up with, multiple MVP 4s and better in succession versus like spreading it out but winning one. But like I said, I kind of put all those guys into the same, in my mind. If you were just like, where do these guys fit? I feel like I'd have them all in a very similar tier.
So I will say, I know Chris wants to share his thoughts, I'm sure. Freddie Freeman's gotten significantly better with age, like significantly better with age. I want to point that out. Arenado was better younger. And Arenado, I was yelling reverse Coors effect. I'm sorry, Jeff. That just means that it's harder to hit on the road for Rockies players because the ball breaks less at home. So when they go on the road, the ball's breaking double. And so they usually have worse splits, which hurts their numbers. But Arenado gets hit by league-adjusted numbers more so than I think he should. So I pose this question. I actually think Arenado deserves to be collected long-term. And I think his cards are actually relatively decently priced. And the reason for that, I'll share my screen and kind of give my argument real fast. But if we look at this again, and I will read it to you, so don't worry. But we can see in 2015, he led the league in home runs, RBI with a 900 OPS. It's actually 898. But that was only a 124 OPS plus. Then the next year, in 2016, he had 41 homers, 133 RBI, both led the league, 932 OPS, which was a 129 OPS plus. Next year, he had a 959 OPS plus, 935 OPS, 962 OPS. all of those are 130-ish or lower OPS plus seasons. He's been hurt by that. And Rockies players, just like the DH might have a slight issue with WAR and advanced analytics, I think Rockies players do get hurt worse than they should. And so
yeah, but they also get a huge boost with black ink stats. I mean, look at that.
I wouldn't say a huge boost.
Huge boost.
He led the league.
You got Dante Bichette.
Okay, that's pre-Humidor cores. That's not even a fair argument to discuss between that and here. But my point remains, I think some of the advanced stats are wrong. Like, right?
I just don't think his OBPs are elite. Like looking at this page, we're talking about 323, 362, 373, 370s are great. But then his last year in Colorado, 303.
Well, that was 2020. That was 2020. So
okay.
323 in a year when he hits all that stuff. That's why his OPS plus is low.
Yeah. Like
he's
never posted a 400 on base percentage.
You know, it takes both slugging and on base. That's why it's a combined statistic, because they're equally valuable. I think at times we overhype on base percentage at times. But my argument is he's been elite offensively. I know it might not be the Mike Trout elite. It's never going to be that tier. But he does also have the recognition, and he's obviously remembered. If you think of a top 10 defensive player, you will think of him. And that's more so than you can say for Machado. It just is more than you can say for him. You know, Machado lost Gold Gloves year after year after year after year after year because of Arenado, every single year. And I do not think 6 platinum gloves will ever be broken. So I think there's an argument. I think overall, if you said he was overvalued, I don't disagree. I think in some ways he might be. I think I want to buy some of his cards and they're too expensive for me for what I want to pay. But that's just the opposite argument.
To tie this back to a conversation we had either last week or the week before, Arenado's career on base percentage and his career OPS plus are a dead heat with a certain Rafael Devers of the Boston Red Sox.
It's too bad Rafael Devers is like horrendous on defense.
Yes, his defense is not good, but Devers does average more.
If Devers have Arenado's defense, I would look at Devers significantly.
I feel like you just made a great case for Arenado.
That's a great point. Arenado is one of the best defensive players of all time. Plus, he has Devers' offensive power.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean it in a negative way.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, I love Rafael Devers, so I'm just saying like
those
two numbers are pretty interesting, and there was a lot of negative talk about Devers a couple of weeks ago. But I think was mostly his.
But I'd love to see Devers double in home run numbers playing 6 years in Coors.
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of in the one ballpark that hurts him the most.
Yeah,
that sounds like a Devers problem. Sorry.
Well, and bottom line, it is a baseball problem, which I thought of when Ty was talking about comparing basketball players from different eras, et cetera. At least they all played on the same size court. The football players played on the same size field. Baseball, it's a little bit harder to measure up. And I know that's what OPS Plus tries to do, but as you mentioned, it's an imperfect comparison.
If you look at, even Fenway and Yankee Stadium, both of which are very heavy offensive ballparks. So, but you don't hear it talked about like you do with Coors. And there's been years, especially in recent memory, not in the 90s. I understand that argument, but where those other ballparks might have been equally or more offensive than Coors. So year in, year out, it can change. Anybody want to share any last thoughts? Freddie Freeman, he's getting better with age. I think he has surpassed a lot of players in my eyes the last few years. So Chris, sorry if there was any Freeman slander.
That's okay. Freeman's last 4 years of WAR have all gone up. He's gone from 3.3 to 6.6 in the last 4 years. Like he's literally gotten better in his early to mid 30s, which is pre-steroids and post-steroids pretty unheard of.
If you look at Freeman's F WAR, he actually has, I believe, an 8 WAR season this year. So
that's crazy. Wow.
All right. Well, thanks for watching.
Stolen bases.
Let us know what your thoughts are on Arenado. Is he overvalued? Is he undervalued? Is he properly valued? And other than that, make sure you subscribe because we're going to be posting essentially once to twice a week. And we want to make sure you don't miss anything. And we'll catch you in the next video.